Grace and peace to you today. I don't know how you think this process works. By process, I mean a couple different things. There's preaching in general, and then there's preaching right now. Preaching in general takes a couple days minimum. Right? I mean, I think of, it's something that a preacher's been working on, right? The sermon is something they've been working on usually for days, if not the whole week. And I think of how usually, right, with the way things worked before COVID, I'd read the text for the week on Monday morning, right? I mean, I'm lucky here in Davidson County. On Monday mornings, we meet with the other Lutheran pastors in the county at the other churches, and we talk about the text. We read through it, we discuss it, we talk about some ideas that we're having, some questions. And so then that sermon starts to kind of work, right? I work on it multiple days, and on Wednesday or Thursday, I sit down and do the brunt of a sermon, right? As far as figuring out and composing my thoughts into one kind of order of things, right? And I don't preach with a manuscript. And so it just means that instead of writing a sermon like a paper, I write an outline that I then try to memorize. And so I can preach from it. And that's all kind of in your head, and on Sunday morning, right after practicing it for a couple days, right, just at different moments throughout the weekend, talking through it on Sunday morning, usually on my drive to worship. You can deliver that sermon, right? And I'm standing up front, and you're all sitting there in the pews. It looks different now, right? I mean, I'm talking to my phone that's on a tripod in front of me. And I'm filming this on Thursday, right, which is when I usually film sermon. It's my last day in the office. I take Fridays off. And you film it on Thursdays, and it's early afternoon usually, and it's what it is now. And I film it, and then I have to go back to the office complex and transfer the video to my computer. I have to edit that video, right, in case something weird happened, and I then have to edit it, with the video that Arch sends that has a hymn in it. Make one video, and then I have to, make that onto a DVD, right? We burn it onto a DVD, and so I can hand it to Kelly before I leave on Thursday afternoon. And Kelly on Friday will come and make copies so that our shut-ins and people who don't have internet perhaps can come pick up a DVD, or people can deliver them to them. And so my own kind of method for recording sermons during COVID has been, I try not to do it in multiple takes, right? I try not to edit multiple takes together to make what you would consider the perfect video, right? Because when I preach on Sunday mornings, it's a one-take thing, right? You preach, and that's kind of how it works. So I try to do it in one take. Sometimes it takes more than one. Usually it's because something happens with technology. Someone calls my phone, or I find out I didn't record right, or I'm not in the video correctly, or whatever. Occasionally it's just such a bad mistake on my part that I start over. Then there's days like today. Preaching with an outline in your head is difficult when there's other things going on, and there's always other things going on, but sometimes it just seems like a lot. I found out this morning that a friend, mentor, father figure died. His name is Eric. I lived with him in college with his wife and his son while I attended Lenore Ryan University. And it's just hard. This is one of those times where I've tried to record this sermon 4 times, and this is the 5th, and it's not going well. And so rather than just record a take where I guess, seem off, I wanted to be honest with all of you that it's just been a tough day. But I'm going to try to preach this sermon on this text from Matthew's Gospel. It's a difficult parable that Jesus gives us. It's a parable about forgiveness, but it's difficult. And it seems to talk about what forgiveness means for us as God's people, how much you should forgive perhaps, and kind of what that means. But I want to start with a story. As I was trying to figure out how to preach this sermon amidst these feelings that I'm feeling, I kept thinking of a story involving Eric. You know, Eric and his wife Tammy would open their homes to college kids every single week. They'd host what they'd call a family dinner. There'd be anywhere from 2 to 3 to 8 to 15 college students in their living room. And Eric would tell stories and ask us tough questions and take an interest in us. And we're better off for it. But we also see them on Sunday mornings, right? We do kind of a Sunday school type thing, but it'd be after worship. Tanny would cook a meal for us then, and we'd talk and discuss and fellowship together over lunch. I remember a particular Sunday morning. There's a couple of us freshman guys who were hanging out with some other guys in the group. These church friends. We'd known each other for a couple of years through Lutheran youth stuff. And this guy, we're gonna call him Derek. It's not his name, but Derek and I and a couple other guys had a falling out, and he wasn't coming to family dinners anymore. He wasn't coming to worship. And so one Sunday morning, right? I mean, Eric didn't mince words. He would just kind of ask tough questions and showed up to worship. And there's an area of the sanctuary we called the Bears Pew, right? Because we went to Lenoir-Rhyne University. The mascot's the Bears. We'd sit there, and it'd be wherever Eric was already sitting, and you'd join him. And he asked me, "Where's Derek?" And at this point, I hadn't seen him in a week or two, and I felt like I had done my part, right? I'd extended an offer, right? Like, "Hey man, what's going on?" Or invited him and tried to make sure he knew what was happening. And he just hadn't returned any of my texts or my phone calls or other olive branches of the sorts. And so I said, "Well, I don't know." And he said, "Well, when you talk to him, right?" Eric's asked me those questions, and I said something to the sorts of, "Why give up?" And I give up on Derek. I don't need this anymore. And there's many things that I remember Eric saying, but one of them was, "You have your whole life to start giving up on people." This is how I remember him saying it. And what I understood in that moment, right, I was convicted. Worship would then begin, and I probably had a little something extra to confess during the confession and forgiveness. But how I remember that story is just a reminder that it's not on us to, we just have to keep trying, right? We don't give up on people, right? And from a gospel standpoint, we don't give up on people because God never gave up on us. And this parable that Jesus tells us, right, in Matthew's gospel today is a weird parable about forgiveness. It starts right after our parable or our story from last week about Peter and, about what those things look like. And Peter, kind of asked Jesus, "Well, how many times should we forgive?" Right? We just heard the story about how to mend relationships and how to solve conflict and all those kind of things. And how many times should I forgive, Jesus? What, like 7 times? And Jesus says, "No, you should forgive a lot more than that," right? He says, I think our text says, 77 times, right? There's some debate biblically, right? If Jesus there said 77 or if 70 times 7, right? In different translations, you can read different numbers, which is 490, which is a lot. But the numbers don't matter, right? Because it's not about math. Right? Those numbers mean something in the Bible, right? 7's a number of perfection and wholeness and all that kind of stuff. But really what Jesus seems to be saying is that you keep forgiving, right? How many times infinity would be what I would tell a child. Perhaps a children's sermon of sorts. You don't give up on people, I think is what Jesus is saying, right? But there's this parable, and it's about forgiveness of debts, right? It's about money, and Matthew talks a lot about money, and I don't think the writer of Matthew is talking about money, right? Because what you have is a parable of Jesus and then some commentary by the writer of Matthew, I think. But this story is about a rich landowner. He owns slaves, which is already problematic enough in today's day and age. Right, but the slave owes him a lot of money, and so the owner says, well, he'll just sell him and his family and property and I guess get the money back. And the guy asked for mercy, right? Have mercy on me and I'll pay you back. And so the landowner, right, the rich landowner does have mercy and forgives his debt and releases him. Well, this guy is then going elsewhere, and he sees one of his fellow slaves who owes him money. It's like 100 denarii, which is a lot of money for someone in that position to have. This whole story kind of seems unrealistic if you think about it. But he says, and he grabs him by the throat and threatens him that he'll throw him in prison if he doesn't pay him back the money. And then the other slaves who witness this, right, they tattle, right? They tell the owner, the landowner, about this guy's actions, and he gets called back and, into, I guess, the room with the landowner, and the landowner's mad, and he's mad that, I forgave you this, and then you couldn't forgive that little bit. And then he sends him, right, to jail, and I guess has him tortured, I think. Then there seems to be these troubling words where Jesus says, this is the same will happen to you if you don't forgive. And again, I don't think that it's about money at this point, right? And so it's hard to figure out. I guess maybe it's because it seems to be transactional, right? Forgiveness seems to be transactional, right? I do something, you do something. Right? But I think what the point is that forgiveness is something that we keep doing, right? Parables are difficult because I think I've talked about this before, right? Parables, you want to put people and certain people into the places of other people, right? And so, which character stands for God? Which character stands for Jesus? Which character stands for us or other people, right? And this one makes it difficult, right? Because it seems that Jesus is comparing God or maybe himself to this rich slave owner. And just a reminder that, parables are never that simple. We're better off looking at simple themes than trying to dive deep into secret meanings that might or might not be true. The reality is that these parables are always kind of presented as describing what the kingdom of God is like, not what the kingdom of God is. And so I think there's some big differences, right? I think that this slave owner, right, who in the system of that time period, and probably even our system today, right, has to regain his honor, right? His honor as a rich person in society, perhaps as a wealthy person, a person of status. And so he has mercy on this slave, and then seems that mercy kind of runs thin when that slave doesn't seem to extend the same mercy to others, right? And so the landowner has to regain his honor and his status. But God doesn't do that, right? Because we know the end of this story. We know that the story of forgiveness in the Gospels always ends up on a cross, and it ends with an empty tomb. And so, God doesn't regain God's honor. Right? In the face of saving face or, I guess maintaining God's honor, right? God instead chooses to allow Jesus, right? Like chooses a cross, chooses weakness, because God's forgiveness goes that far. God's forgiveness doesn't have a limit, right? Because God doesn't give up on people. And so maybe that's our lesson, right? What we can tease out of this story is more to do with forgiveness. Not so much that it has to be done, right? I think we got to be careful that we don't hear a sermon like this, and right, because I think it's hard because the Gospel of Matthew seems to say, like, you forgive or else. I don't believe that God has that mobster or else mentality. I believe that God keeps offering forgiveness, and therefore we are tasked, right? We're challenged, right? We won't have to, right? God forgives us whether we forgive others or not. I believe that. But nevertheless, we're challenged to share a kind of love that looks like God's love. We're not perfect. We can't keep forgiving, right? But we can do our best to not give up on people. We can do our best to continue to try. Because I think what God knows, what I think Eric knew when he told me that day, is that relationships are more important than being right, than figuring out who was wrong. It's bigger than forgiveness, right? Forgiveness serves relationships, not the other way around. And so we have forgiveness, right? Forgiveness is a reality because forgiveness allows us to continue to be in loving relationships. Helps us acknowledge the past for what the past is, but to open the doors to the future so that new and great things can happen. Let's not give up on people. Amen.